The tale opens with Vikier van Baskerville, once the loyal hound of the powerful Baskerville family, kneeling before a guillotine, accused of conspiring with demons. He had been betrayed and condemned to death. As the blade hung above him, he swore that if given another chance, he would never again live as a mere hound. In a twist of fate, Vikier wakes not in the afterlife but in a crib, his body tiny and weak. His surroundings are loud, filled with the cries of infants. For now, the cradle of swords offered the first step towards his newfound strength. The patriarch of the Baskerville family, Hugo Le Baskerville, strolled through the nursery, inspecting the newborns. Most were wailing, but Hugo dismissed them all as insignificant, mere trash. Then he noticed Vikier, unusually silent and observant. With a flick of his hand, Hugo ordered that this quiet child be moved to the cradle of swords. The servant complied, unaware of the hatred brewing in Vikier's gaze, remembered how Hugo had orchestrated his unjust execution. This time, things would be different. Vikier had once been an illegitimate son, trained in a brutal environment to become a tool for the Baskervilles. His loyalty had been unflinching, hoping for approval, but that loyalty had earned him nothing but death. He knew too much, and that sealed his fate. Now, with a second chance, Vikier vowed never to live as a hound again. He would rise and take his revenge. The cradle of swords was a deadly trial for all Baskerville children. They were cast into a maze of blades and had to reach the Styx River, a legendary body of water that could turn their flesh to iron. But the river had limits. Only a few could benefit from it. Vikier knew he had to reach it first. He crawled through the maze, remembering his past failures. In his previous life, he had been betrayed by his siblings and denied the river's blessing. But this time, he would seize it for himself. Suddenly, he plunged into the icy waters of the Styx River. The sharp pain from the water seeping into his wounds was excruciating, but Vikier gritted his teeth. He had to endure. Outside, his attendants were shouting, worried he would die if he stayed in too long. But Vikier ignored them, focusing on absorbing every drop of the river's power. Even when Hugo called for him to emerge, Vikier refused to surrender this rare opportunity. But soon, his body started to fail him. Water filled his lungs, and his consciousness began to slip. Just when it seemed like he might drown, Hugo yanked him out. The patriarch noticed something unusual. Vikier already had teeth, a surprising trait for one so young. A greedy little hound, Hugo remarked with a chuckle, recognizing the boy's relentless hunger for power. The moment Vikier regained consciousness, he vowed to use his sharpened canines to one day tear Hugo's head from his shoulders. He would bring the Baskerville family to ruin. Vikier, now a child, had once been a prodigy of unparalleled intellect. But in the Baskerville family, without the purest bloodline, he had been nothing more than a pawn. As he grew, he mastered the arts of assassination and espionage. But his true test came at 30 when the demonic realm opened its gates. Unleashing an invasion of horrors, Vikier had fought valiantly, but when peace was finally restored, the kingdom repaid him with betrayal. Now back in the nursery, Vikier realized he had absorbed the Styx River's power. This was a new beginning, one that offered a better start than before. As he processed this, a maid entered, muttering about a mysterious gift from Madame for young Master Vikier, surprised by the notion of receiving a present from anyone in the family, especially as a bastard. Vikier watched as the maid placed a box beside him. Inside were 2 deadly vipers, hissing and ready to strike. It was clear. Someone wanted him dead, and Madame was behind it. But Vikier caught the vipers with his bare hands, filled with hatred. He would tear the entire Baskerville family apart with his own 2 hands. The next morning, the nursery was in shock. The child had slept peacefully beside the 2 dead vipers. The nannies on duty were tortured and executed. But no one could explain how the vipers had gotten there. Only Vikier knew the truth. Years passed, and Vikir found himself in a classroom, learning about swordsmanship. The levels were explained. Sword Beginner, Sword Expert, Sword Graduator, and finally, Sword Master. The pinnacle of the art, Sir Hugo, the strongest of the Baskervilles, was a sword master, a fact that awed the students. But Vikir's thoughts were elsewhere. He was plotting his revenge, wondering how long it would take to kill Hugo. After class, the infamous triplets, Hugo's trident, cornered Vikir. They had tormented him in his past life, and now they mocked him again, calling him a garbage van and reminding him of the rumors about the Styx River and the vipers. They brandished a knife, eager to test if his skin had really become as tough as steel. As they taunted him, Vikir stayed calm, even when one of the triplets held him down. Minutes passed, and the triplets realized the knife couldn't harm him. Frustrated, they began to release him. But Vikir had other plans. One triplet noticed his finger was missing. Vikir had bitten it off. With a wicked smile, Vikir reminded the boy of his promise to eat his own hand. The triplets panicked, trying to calm the situation, but Vikir wasn't interested in mercy. He twisted the boy's hand, letting him know that in Baskerville, power outweighed age. The triplets attacked in desperation, but Vikir overpowered them with ease. He gave them an ultimatum. One of them could leave, but they had to decide who. He threw a knife in front of them, watching with satisfaction as they turned on each other, fighting for survival. Meanwhile, in the Patriarch's office, John Barrymore reported troubling news to Hugo Le Baskerville. The Morgue clan was stirring up trouble in the Ruby Mines. But Hugo was unconcerned. More interesting was the report from the juvenile fortress. Vikir had excelled in the written exam, and the practical test was just days away. However, John hesitated before revealing a recent fight among the young masters. Hugo, curious, asked how many had died. None, John replied, but the damage was severe. Highborough's teeth were shattered, Middleborough's jaw was broken, and Lowborough had lost a finger. Hugo merely laughed. Though they had regained their physical health after treatment, the emotional toll the incident had taken on them was undeniable. Patriarch Hugo was stunned, remarking that the brothers had always been so close and couldn't understand why they had fallen out. John then revealed that the source of the conflict was an 8-year-old boy named Master Vikir. Vikir had not only severely injured the brothers, but had also outperformed everyone, achieving the highest scores on the written exam. Concerned by the mention of the juvenile fortress, Patriarch Hugo summoned Vikir to his office. When Vikir entered, a calm smile graced his face. Hugo, noticing the boy's growth, commented on how much Vikir had changed. Then, with a more serious tone, he brought up the troubling incident in which Vikir had incapacitated the 9-year-old triplets. Vikir dismissed the concerns, stating that they had received proper medical attention, but Hugo's words were cutting, revealing that the true damage wasn't physical, but something deeper, an injury to the heart. He explained how the brothers' bond had been shattered, asking if Vikir thought his actions were wrong. Vikir, with a hint of defiance, retorted by asking what exactly he had done wrong. Hugo then told him that he had broken the brothers' spirits, to which Vikir confidently replied that strength made him right, and the stronger one couldn't possibly be in the wrong. Hugo then dropped a surprising bombshell. The brothers had forgiven him. Vikir was stunned by this revelation and with disbelief asked, "They forgave me?" Suddenly, a memory flashed in Vikir's mind. Before his regression, he remembered a visit from the youngest daughter of a family devastated by the Baskerville clan. Despite her family's ruin, she had forgiven Hugo after years of suffering and had become a nun. Vikir, echoing Hugo's past words, mused that forgiveness was a weakness, a shield used by those too powerless to take revenge. As Vikir spoke of the power of strength, Hugo nodded approvingly, his eyes gleaming with understanding. Turning to his head butler, Barrymore, Hugo instructed him to let Vikir take whatever snacks he wished from the food storage, enough for him to carry on his own. With a sly grin, Vikir requested chocolates. As they headed to the storage room, the head butler began to explain the chocolate's origin, telling Vikir that it was the finest quality the Morgue clan had painstakingly obtained. But Fakir quickly cut him off, rejecting anything processed. The head butler, taken aback, asked what he wanted instead. With a sharp look in his eyes, Fakir demanded cacao beans, the ones with the richest aroma. Confused but eager to comply, the head butler arranged to have the beans brought to him, leaving a strange tension in the air. Fakir popped one of the cacao beans into his mouth. As he chewed, the chef informed him that these were the legendary bloody beans, known for their intense aroma. Just one bean, the chef explained, could be used to produce 100 liters of chocolate. The head butler watched closely as Fakir consumed the bitter bean without flinching. He couldn't help but think to himself that Fakir must have a deep love for chocolate to eat it so raw and bitter. If Fakir processed the beans, the head butler realized, he could have an enormous amount of chocolate. The chef offered to process the beans for him and send them to his room, but Fakir declined, saying he would take them just as they were. The head butler, perplexed by Fakir's strange preference, was left wondering if the boy had particularly unusual tastes. But Fakir wasn't interested in the chocolate at all. He had a much bigger plan for the cacao beans. In just 5 days, the young master would need them for the practical exam. However, none of them realized that a catastrophic event, unprecedented in the history of the Baskerville clan, was about to unfold. In the world of the Baskerville family, they were infamous as the Berserkers, a family with a brutal reputation forged through grueling training and evaluations. The moment a child took their first steps, they were thrust into a relentless test of endurance. They had to climb steep mountains, forbidden to rest except during allocated times. At night, they slept beside monster corpses, preparing them to face the most unimaginable dangers. This relentless training shaped them into fierce warriors, earning them respect and fear across the land. By the time the children turned 8, the true test began. They became known as the Young Hounds, ready to face the deadly evaluation that solidified the family's reputation. This test took place in a remote area on the infamous Le Rouge et le Noir mountain, a place teeming with monsters. It was here that the Young Hounds would prove their worth. Standing before the young masters, Shadow Dog Pavlov van Baskerville, the clan's strict instructor, explained the rules of the evaluation. They would be expected to survive for a month in the treacherous mountain range, hunting and defeating the fiercest monsters. Points would be awarded based on their performance. 10 points for survival, 30 if they survived without becoming disabled, 50 for defeating another young master and surviving, and 70 for defeating a monster and surviving. If they managed to do all of the above, they would receive 90 points. However, Pavlov made it clear that if a young master stole another's badge, they would gain extra points. But if they died, they would score 0. He also reminded them that there was no perfect score of 100 points. He reiterated a lesson from Sir Hugo. A swordsman dies the moment they become arrogant. Finally, Pavlov warned the young masters not to stray outside the designated area, for the mountain was a forbidden place, filled with unknown dangers. He encouraged them to remain within the space where the monsters had already been subdued. During the exam, shadow dogs, secretive guardian knights, would be hiding and observing their every move. As the young masters prepared for the exam, some couldn't help but whisper about Fakir's past feats. Despite their chatter, Fakir remained calm, his thoughts focused on Le Rouge et le Noir mountain, a place he had visited before. Nearby, the triplets stood nervously, beads of sweat forming on their brows, filled with fear for what was to come. Shadow Dog Pavlov wished the young masters good luck before the bell rang, signaling the start of the exam. As the bell echoed through the mountain, all the young masters scrambled in different directions, each trying to gain a strategic position. One young master, recalling a spot he had noticed during last year's exam, planned to head there for an advantage. His companion, believing he couldn't survive on his own, decided to follow with the intent of taking the spot from him. Meanwhile, the triplets bickered among themselves, each wanting to go their own way and come out on top. Pavlov observed them carefully, fully aware of the importance of minimizing casualties. While killing wasn't strictly forbidden, it was discouraged, and those who killed would face deductions in their points. Along with the other shadow dogs, Pavlov was committed to preventing any unnecessary deaths during the test. One of the shadow dogs, assigned to watch Vikir, was taken aback when Vikir headed toward a restricted area. Curiosity piqued. The shadow dog wondered where the young master was going and if he was the renowned genius rumored to have stood out since childhood. Intrigued, the shadow dog eagerly anticipated seeing what Vikir would do next. Vikir, however, moved with a quiet determination. He approached a large tree and began assessing the area. Satisfied that the soft ground was ideal for a break, he decided to rest. The shadow dog, confused by Vikir's decision, wondered if the young master was truly a genius or if he was simply avoiding the action. While other participants were busy battling for points or hunting monsters, Vikir gathered wood and practiced with a wooden stick. After a while, he peacefully slept under the tree. The shadow dog, growing more impatient, began to question Vikir's strategy. It had been a long time since Vikir had taken any significant action, and the shadow dog observed that Vikir spent most of his time digging holes, gathering food, and collecting materials. Doubt crept in. Was Vikir truly the prodigy they had heard about? Or was he simply avoiding confrontation in the exam? Frustrated, the shadow dog eventually decided to leave and seek something more interesting. The moment the shadow dog disappeared, a smile spread across Vikir's face. Relieved, he thought to himself that it had been nice to finally relax. He reflected on the past, remembering a conversation with a teammate about using cacao beans to mask fishy odors. Vikir threw some of the bloody beans into the fire, noting that with the interfering shadow dog finally gone, he was ready to begin his real preparations. Several days later, Vikir ventured into the restricted area, a place he recognized from his scouting days. As he roamed, he caught the unmistakable scent of something burning, and the charred remains of tree roots signaled that the monster he sought was nearby. Then, he saw it. A burning stool. Vikir's eyes narrowed. He knew exactly what he had found. A hellhound. The hellhound, a terrifying creature from the depths of hell, stood before him, flames pouring from its mouth. The hellhound was a formidable beast, known for bringing devastation wherever it appeared. With a B+ risk rating and standing 3 meters tall, its sulfuric flames could easily ignite anything in its path. The hellhound's fiery breath and gaze were lethal, and anyone unfortunate enough to be bitten would meet certain death. Its flames would burn anything they touched until nothing remained. As the massive creature loomed over Vikir, he realized with a sinking feeling that he had walked into a dangerous trap. The hellhound was no ordinary monster. It was a force of nature, and Vikir had just stepped into its domain. The hellhound was one of the most dangerous creatures in the land, and Vikir had barely survived an encounter with one when he was 18 in his past life. Now, at the age of 8, he knew that taking on such a beast alone was impossible. But Vikir wasn't without a plan. He recalled a trick from his previous life, one that even a child could use to outsmart the hellhound. As the creature lunged at him, Vikir swiftly dodged to the side, remembering the first weakness of hellhounds. They could only move in straight lines. Their speed made it difficult for them to suddenly change direction. Thinking quickly, Vikir dropped some water on the ground as the hellhound charged toward him. He yelled out, reminding himself of the second weakness of lookout monsters. They could not cross water. As a result, the hellhound was forced to take a longer route to reach him, giving Vikir more time to dodge. He knew that even shallow water could slow down the hellhound significantly, exposing another weakness of all canine monsters. When they ran, they couldn't keep their mouths closed. As the bloodthirsty hellhound continued its attack, Vikir found himself in another dangerous situation. But he was ready. With a calm but decisive motion, he tossed a bloody bean into the hellhound's mouth. The beast whined in agony, unable to move. Vikir explained aloud that chocolate was toxic to canines, and with the bloody bean's unique ability to create 100 liters of chocolate from a single bean, it was clear what effect it would have on the hellhound. Drawing his sword, Vikir aimed for the creature's kidney, striking with precision. In a single, swift motion, He pierced the hellhound's kidney, killing it instantly. As the monster's energy, or XP, flowed into him, Vikir felt a surge of strength. His sword felt lighter in his hand, and he realized that he was quickly regaining the power he had before his regression, even though he was still only 8. A thought crossed his mind. What would Hugo's reaction be when he saw that a child had slain a B+ risk-rated monster? Vikir stood proudly, ready to claim the hellhound's head as a trophy. He knew that with this victory, he had already secured first place in the practical exam, a feat he could never have imagined achieving in his past life. However, his moment of triumph was short-lived. A pack of hellhounds appeared, likely seeking revenge for their fallen comrade. Vikir remained calm, knowing he had the upper hand. He had already studied these creatures' weaknesses and knew how to defeat them. Drawing his sword, Vikir prepared to face the hellhounds. He still had plenty of bloody beans left, and he was eager to use them to his advantage. A smirk crossed his face as he cut off the head of the fallen hellhound, taunting the approaching hellhounds. He knew they were no match for his skills. As he stood ready, something unexpected happened. The hellhounds began to whimper. Vikir was taken aback. These fierce beasts, known for their bloodlust, were acting strangely, almost as though they were frightened of him. A mere 8-year-old, hellhounds never submitted to their prey, even in death. Vikir frowned, trying to figure out what had caused this strange reaction. His thoughts were interrupted when he turned around to find a colossal creature standing before him. It was a Cerberus, the legendary 3-headed dog from Greek mythology. The creature was enormous, towering at least 7 meters high, and Vikir recognized it immediately. A Cerberus was a creature with an A+ risk rating, far beyond the strength of the hellhounds. Vikir was stunned. He had heard that Cerberuses typically roamed the 7th ridge of the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain. So what was one doing here? The Cerberus was known as the ultimate lookout monster, guarding the path where all the dead spirits traveled. As Vikir observed it, he noticed the Cerberus was bleeding and had several arrows embedded in its body. It became clear to him that someone must have been hunting the beast, and it had been driven all the way to this location while being pursued. This was an opportunity Vikir couldn't pass up. An injured A+ ranked monster was a chance he couldn't let slip away. Despite the Cerberus's immense power, Vikir had been concealing his true abilities. A seasoned sword expert, he had reached a high level of mastery in his craft. His body had been strengthened by the river Styx, and the weapons he wielded worked in perfect harmony against the wounded Cerberus. With his refined swordsmanship, developed through countless battles with demon clans, he landed several hits on the Cerberus, slowly gaining ground. Vikir believed he could defeat the beast. This injured Cerberus was manageable, he thought. But in a moment of carelessness, he let his guard slip. The Cerberus seized the opportunity, retaliating with a powerful swipe of its claws. The first strike shattered Vikir's sword, and the second sent him flying through the air. The force of the blow hurled him into a tree trunk, the sickening thud echoing through the air as blood spilled from his mouth. He was badly injured, his body battered and motionless. Vikir's eyes fluttered open, a surge of panic coursing through him as the memory of the Cerberus's direct attack flashed before his eyes. A sharp pain shot through his left arm, and he wondered if the beast had torn it off. But when he glanced down, he saw that his arm was still attached, though wounded. He felt a wave of relief. It wasn't severed, and the Cerberus's blow had only caused deep injuries. He thought of the river Styx, its protective magic likely playing a part in shielding him from the full force of the attack. He was thankful for its protection, but he knew he couldn't rely on it forever. His momentary relief quickly faded as he realized the damage was still severe. He wouldn't survive another hit from the Cerberus, so he gathered his strength and dodged the creature's next strike. Vikir's instincts kicked in. As an experienced hunter, he knew when to fight and when to flee. Survival was the priority, and in this moment, his best option was to run. He dashed away, tail tucked between his legs, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. His eyes scanned the area for a way out, and then, just ahead, he spotted it. An iron fence, a few yards away. His heart leaped with hope. If he could just reach that fence, he would be out of the restricted area and closer to safety. With a surge of adrenaline, Vikir pushed his body to its limits, running faster than ever before. As he neared the fence, he made a desperate dash through the gate, the sound of his pounding heart almost deafening. He had made it. He was out of the restricted area, but the danger wasn't over. Vikir knew that he had to reach the safe haven he had prepared for himself before the mission. As he ran, the fear of the Cerberus chasing him loomed over him, but he focused on his goal. His eyes darted through the woods, scanning for the pit he had set up earlier. Finally, he saw it. A deep pit lined with sharp wooden spears. With a burst of speed, Vikir leapt toward it, narrowly avoiding the Cerberus's jaws as the beast lunged. The Cerberus plunged into the pit, trapped by the spears. Vikir, heart still racing, landed safely on the other side, knowing he had escaped certain death. For now, Vikir couldn't suppress a grin as he looked down at the Cerberus, knowing he had prepared thoroughly for this battle. The wooden spears he'd crafted were smeared with the essence of the bloody beans, which acted as poison to canine monsters. The Cerberus let out a growl, foam dripping from its mouth, but Vikir remained calm, ready for the next phase of the fight. He knew this would be one of his most challenging encounters yet, as the Cerberus was a high-ranking demon, formidable and deadly. Without hesitation, Vikir grabbed a wooden spear and threw it at the Cerberus, hitting the hellhound's side. The beast staggered, but it was still alive, its fiery gaze fixed on him as it advanced, its massive form looming closer. Vikir started counting the creature's steps, keeping track of its movements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the 7th step, Cerberus suddenly stopped and collapsed to the ground, just inches away from Vikir. Relief washed over him as he realized that the rumors had been true. The spear he'd thrown wasn't just any weapon. It had been laced with the venomous fang of the deadly bloody mamba snake, a poison that paralyzed its victims, preventing them from taking more than 7 steps once bitten. Vikir had kept this spear hidden since his younger years, knowing it would be useful someday. As the Cerberus lay lifeless before him, energy surged from its body into Vikir, strengthening him. He marveled at the power coursing through him, but was quickly brought back to reality. He now had to figure out how to transport the enormous body of the Cerberus back. The creature's death would be obvious to anyone who found it, and Vikir considered who might have witnessed the battle. The Cerberus was a gatekeeper, and that meant it was guarding something, likely a dungeon. Vikir's pulse quickened at the thought of treasure hidden within. Dungeons were known to house powerful monsters, and this one might be no different. Determined to explore further, Vikir thought it wise to cover himself with the Cerberus's feces, knowing it would help mask his scent from any smaller monsters lurking in the area. With his keen senses fully alert, Vikir tracked the Cerberus's steps through the forest. He observed the dried soil, rotting leaves and moist roots as he followed the trail with unwavering focus. As he retraced the path, his eyes widened in recognition. This wasn't the first time he had been here. This was the dungeon the Cerberus had been guarding, and Vikir realized he had been here before. The chapter ended with a cliffhanger, leaving the mystery of the dungeon and what lay inside unanswered.